Okay, and we're good to go. Kath, you can't make me laugh right before we start. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Series 2, Episode 8 of Holistic Emails, Email and More, a Q&A with. I'm your moderator, as always, Skip Federa, and for those of you who are new to the show, on every episode, we showcase a different topic with a different panel of experts, and today we're talking about building a healthy database. As you know, this is really your show. We bring together the experts, but it is your questions that drive the conversation. It's unscripted, unrehearsed, and hopefully a whole lot of fun. So far, so good. So what are your burning questions about building a healthy database? Please ask your questions in the questions area to the right-hand side of your screen, and feel free to use the chat for everything else, including providing us with some information about how we did at the end. Now, I've got some stuff to show you, so I'm going to share my screen. But while I do that, we've got people dialing in from all over the world. And it would be really easy for our panelists to kind of tie themselves into linguistic knots around, well, but if you do it in this country or that country or whatever. So to solve that problem, let's get everybody, go ahead, go to the chat real quick and let us know where you are. The first one I looked at was Guys, which was Silverstone. Okay, so we got some UK, Denmark, some US. Excellent. So we're kind of all over. Well, this is probably a good point to mention that none of us is qualified nor indemnified to give legal advice. So please seek qualified legal advice on the data protection laws in the markets in which you operate. Now, let's face it, some questions about building a healthy database will be very specific to your situation or can be quite complicated. If this is the case, don't worry. Each speaker will be happy to answer your questions in our roundtable discussions later. So be sure to pull up a chair, turn on your camera, plug in your mic, and join us as we keep the chat going in a more formal setting. Also, in addition to chatting to our amazing speakers and meeting other email marketers, one lucky roundtable participant will win a Kindle copy of Kath Pay's book, Holistic Email Marketing. Yeah, you can see it. I've got one here. It's awesome. I encourage you to look inside the cover. Well, you can on a Kindle, but just in the first page, praise for the first person giving praise for this book. An amazing, amazing speaker, author, expert. He's genius. Makes the book. Really does. Okay, enough goofing around. Let's pay some bills, shall we? Before we go any further, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. So this series is brought to you by our gold sponsors, Iterable and Validity, and our silver sponsors, RPE Origin and Email Expert. Thank you all for everything you do to make this series possible. Now, if you want to go back and look at any of the great episodes from Series 1, or you need to catch up on Series 2 so far, you can find them all on YouTube or on Holistic Email's website, and we'll put a link in the chat for you to access those. Now, the title of our episode is Tips and Tricks on Growing a Healthy Database. In the promo for this event, I mentioned that the David Ogilvy quote, "We sell or else." I used to work for Ogilvy, and it was posted right outside the canteen. We sell or else. And I said in the promo that our job had changed since he had uttered those words back in the 60s. I said that our job was now to build relationships. But after I recorded the promo, I heard a story from a friend about her early days as a pharmaceutical rep. She was talking about how she kept an index card in each doctor's practice that she went to, each doctor's practice in her territory. And after every visit, she would update the card with the name of the receptionist, how many kids they had, the kids' names, the kind of pets and their names, the receptionist's interests, basically whatever information she needed to strike up a conversation the next time she was in the office to get into the doctor's office. That sounds like a CRM to me. Just kept on index cards. She was using it to build relationships so that she could sell. So whether it's building relationships or selling, it's all about the data. So if it's all about the data, how do we go about building a healthy database? And we've put together a brilliant panel for you today to help us answer that very question. With me, as always, is best-selling author and this year's recipient of the EEC Email Marketer Thought Leader of the Year. We got to shorten that somehow, Kath. I don't know how. We just got to shorten that. Kath Pay of Holistic Email Marketing. We also have Leah Palumba, COO of IL3X, Alice Cornell, the Director of Deliverability at Change.org, and Guy Hansen, Vice President of Customer Engagement International at our good friends Validity. Now, while you're getting your questions into the question area over there to the right, I will ask our panelists to quickly introduce themselves. Leah, do you want to start?
Always. I couldn't wait to talk and to say hi and welcome to everyone. It was beautiful to see where everyone is coming from. I'm Leah Palumba. I'm CEO of Alex. I'm currently in Italy, actually, but I do come from 10 plus years in the corporate world, in particular talking about customers. So everything about marketplaces. How do we join people together? And these are all always businesses that are based on the data set. So quality of data, how to grow a healthy database is something very close to my heart, and it's beautiful to see so many people here today, and as well as the other panelists.
Excellent. Sorry, caught me off guard there. Alice.
Thanks, Skip. Hi, everyone. Alice Cornell, Director of Email Deliverability at Change.org. Change is the world's largest platform for social change, and we have somewhere north of 440 million people making change through our site. We send a lot of email to support them, and of course, it's my job to make sure all of those emails reach the inbox, which is fun.
Excellent. You dropped off there a little bit, but we'll move on to Guy.
Hi everyone, I'm Guy Hansen. I am VP for Customer Engagement at Validity. Validity, for those of you that don't know, are a player in the data quality and email optimization space. So particularly having the email conversation, think return path, think 250 OK, think Bright Verify, all under the Validity roof now, and that's what we do for a living. Outside of Validity, I also have a long-term involvement with the DMA, where at various times I have known Skip, Kath, and Alice. In fact, I was thinking about it. I reckon I know each of you at least 10 years now. Leah's the odd one out. I only know her for the last 5 or so. And it's really great that we finally found the opportunity to get on the virtual stage together today.
Well, I can hardly wait till we're all on the real stage together, because that'll be much more fun.
Even better.
And if we could do this on a real stage in a pub, that's just hashtag winning. Kath, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, you kind of sort of said about the book and the award and everything, and I'm going to find out this evening, actually, straight after this, whether the book has actually won an award. So that's great. It's in as a finalist. And I'm CEO of Boutique Email Marketing Consultancy, Holistic Email Marketing. We help our clients with their strategic work, projects, struggles, challenges, and we get to do a lot of the fun things that a lot of marketers don't have the time to do, or sometimes even the know-how. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we had a brief discussion before the event today, and what I think we're going to do is we're going to try to break the questions kind of into 2 halves. We'll see how well that works. First half, we'll talk about healthy, and then the second half, we'll talk about growing, because we want to make sure we get both those things covered. And there's going to be lots of overlap, but I just don't want to end up spending the whole time talking about healthy and not talking about growing. And we've got a lot of good questions in already, but as a way to kick us off, and this is a free-for-all, so anybody jump in on an answer to this, define healthy. What is a healthy database?
Well, I don't mind being the first up. A healthy database, there's so many ways that we could paint this, but for me, it's one that is engaging with your program. If you've got people that are enjoying your email, engaging with it in a positive way, that is a healthy database.
Yeah.
I think that's
Okay.
I mean, I'm working with a client at the moment. They've actually got deliverability issues, big ones. And, you know, when I'm doing my research and reviewing and understanding what is making up their whole program, one of the key factors that I found is that they're using partners. And these partners are basically obviously being rewarded upon quantity, not quality. And so they're giving them the quantity, and that's actually the source of a lot of the issues that they're having. So, you know, healthy also therefore means engaging. Healthy also means, you know, people who actually want to be on. This is a really, really scary thing, right? The biggest complaints actually come during their welcome program. That's a big indicator of a not healthy database, isn't it? It's like they're going,
Ouch,
how did I get
that
on
hurts.
this? Yeah. So, yeah.
I was having a conversation with Steve Henderson from Amasis, who sits on the email council, and we came up with the sort of principle of what we ended up calling the 3 C's when we're talking about sort of healthy data. So C is for compliant, C is for correct, and C is for complete. And I reckon if you can sort of tick all 3 boxes there, you're probably going a fairly decent way towards having healthy data.
I can hear Steve Henderson. That's going to be in a presentation. He's going to use that for a long time. I can
3
just
C's.
hear him saying that. I can hear him saying that. So it's an interesting point, and actually it jumps right into Liz. I'm going to guess it's Chocolo. That's a guess. Hope I didn't get that wrong, Liz. But Liz is going through a bunch of stuff at the moment, and is interested in, like, what are the KPIs, or, you know, what are the KPIs of healthy? How do you know that your list is healthy, your database is healthy?
I would suggest. Sorry.
No, you go.
Well, I'm just going to give a hint, and then happy to hand it over, Kath. I think that when we're looking at data set, there are a couple of trends that we need to monitor. One is how much data come in, and then is how much data goes out, because there is a decay in the list. So there is a decay. Part of this decay you can't really control it. It's fairly standard. It's fairly almost foreseeable. We know that there is a 2% per month. There is a 70% per year for some industries. But when you start seeing that there is something that is not matching, then that you should have the right metrics and the right control mechanisms to be able to get yourself up to speed and say, okay, something needs to change here. So I would say probably how many new users you get, what is your churn rate, what are you missing? I would say those ones are key elements to keep under control.
Mm-hmm. In some ways, there's a lot of KPIs that are very much reflective of not just the health of the list, but also the health of your program, right? So this can be the tricky one, because, you know, you're looking at your spam complaints, and that could be because of, you know, they've been on the program long enough, or they don't actually like your email program. They don't like the content, the offers, or they've just had enough, or maybe it's time for them to move on. So, you know, because complaints are one of the things that you do look at for health of the list, bounce rates, of course, unsubscribes and everything, but also they're not just pure play, you know, healthy list metrics. And that's why I think it's really hard to separate your healthy list sometimes from your program as well. You know, you need to understand that you can have a really healthy list, but if your program isn't actually giving them the results that they want as you know, your audience, then then you're not doing a good job.
There's two components to that, though, right? Because, you know, I was just going to ask you, can you separate the two? But we use the word healthy, which maybe we shouldn't have. But there's, I can do things to keep myself healthy as an individual, right? I can eat right, drink less than 14 units a week, exercise more, whatever, drink less coffee, sleep better, all those kinds of things, meditate. And that doesn't necessarily stop me from getting sick, getting a disease, right? It might mitigate how ill I get or how well I fight that disease. But I guess is there the same corollary in email where you can do things to keep your list healthy, and there's a shock to the system that means your program is not necessarily healthy, if that makes sense. Alice, I'm gonna throw you under a bus or put you on the spot. Not throw you under a bus. I'm gonna put you on the spot because I recently had a chat with your colleague Sylvia Roll, and she was talking about the absolutely explosive growth you guys had last year in your email program in terms of number of signups and all the things that you normally do to keep your list healthy. You just couldn't manage it because the list grew so quick, so fast. And that's kind of in my mind. Your list got. I'm trying to think of something that's not horribly terminal, but still bad enough that you worry about. Anyway, I don't want to pick on any disease, but you know what I mean. Your list almost got a disease, and you had to sort of manage the disease as well as managing the other part of the rest of the body.
That's absolutely true. And luckily for us, we've already put in place a lot of protections for our list because we realize that our data is really precious. And so we try to prevent invalid or typo addresses or all of those addresses entering the database in the first place. And there's lots of ways that one can do that. And I think we're probably going to talk about those in more detail. But protecting your list at the first point is so important. So you're preventing rubbish from coming in because we know rubbish in, rubbish out. But I think what really saved us from our list becoming terminal was that we already had in place a segmentation system based on engagement. So for Change.org, if people are engaging a lot, we send them more mail. If they're not engaging so much, we send them less. So we use engagement as a measure of how much volume to send people. And through this period of absolute berserk growth for us, it went really crazy. Because we had that sort of structure in place, we were able to use it as a basis to make sure that we still served our users appropriately. We didn't overwhelm them or underwhelm them. We tried to get it just right. Of course, we never get it completely just right, but I think that is what having those fundamentals in place are really what protected the database from being burnt out.
It's almost like the healthy eating and the exercise and everything. You already had that in place before the shock came in. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Alice, just to pitch in on that one, because we've seen something very similar in eBay. We saw that like the users that were more engaged, the ones that were purchasing more, they were browsing more, they were doing more activities, they were putting more items in the cart, they're getting a lot of emails, but their tolerance as well was very high because they really wanted it. So it wasn't even fine for us to decide, yeah, you're going to get this one, but not that one. We still had to honor that contract that we make, that we're going to keep informed. So I'm very interested that you're doing something similar because it's obviously like best practice that goes across industries, this one, to say, I'm going to understand the tolerance of my users.
Yeah, that is really interesting. And that whole notion of honoring the contract of what they want to or what they said they wanted to receive and what you would prefer to deliver now is there. That's a whole interesting. That's probably a whole separate panel discussion, if I'm honest. The notion of you asked for X, but you're not responding to X. You're responding to Y. I should send you more Y, but maybe I should ask you if you don't want X. But it's really hard to. It's hard to say that and do that.
Yeah.
Just before we move on, there is a burning question that has some people curious. Charlotte, it's Kath. that has the rooster outside her window. Although Guy also has chickens in his back garden as well.
Yeah, mine
So,
don't crow like that.
You may also hear, you'll probably hear a dog or two, and Kath's been known to have goats in her background as well. So hopefully we'll get the whole menagerie today. So, Angel Nino Franco asks, and she asks a specific question about is the 20 to 30% annual churn rate still applicable today? But I guess more taking that question, making it broader. How, if I'm a marketer, how should I benchmark? How should I benchmark the health of my database?
I've always believed that, and I know, Guy, you're gonna have a lot to say on this, so you're going to tell me what you think. I've always gone on sort of, everybody's KPIs are different. For us, it's signatures on the petition. That's always going to be different depending on what a company, what your business case is. But I've always looked at the negative indicators. I'm a big fan of negative indicators, and so I've always believed that you've got your unsubscribe rate, your bounce rate, and your spam complaint rate. And so I've always think that bounces should be around 1%, unsubscribes 0.1%, and complaints 0.01%. And that's been my goal. I haven't always got there, but that's if those are in place, then I know I'm doing something right. What do you think, Guy?
The good news is I'm going to agree with you wholeheartedly. And
well done, Alice.
I think it comes back to sort of what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago. What are the important KPIs to sort of measure, the sort of health of your database, the health of your customer base? And we're just about to release the 21 edition of the DMA's marketer email tracker. And a very similar question was asked of the marketers who were surveyed by this year's edition. What KPIs do you use? And their answers sort of reinforce the suspicion that we've had for a little while, that there is like a natural bias to what I would call positive metrics, the good news metrics. So, almost half of responders say, we're sort of focused on clicks and opens and revenue and conversions. Far smaller percentages focused on the negative metrics that you've just described, like bounces and complaints. And it feels like a miss because, if you think about it, clicks are a great positive indicator of engagement. Complaints are a very, very sort of valuable indicator of negative engagement. For me, clicks and complaints are almost sort of two sides of the same engagement coin, but one is reported as an effective metric by 50% of the responders, and the others respond by 10%. And you're thinking you're missing the picture. And just to sort of finish that thought, those percentages that you quoted, Alice, I mean, I think those are sort of close to my own experience, but I think because they are typically quite small numbers, you've sometimes almost got to do the calculation for people to help them understand the impact. But if you take your numbers together and say, every time you do a broadcast, you're going to lose 1% of your list to aggregate bounces, complaints, opt-outs, etc., and then do the maths and say, listen, if you're a program that even sends once a week, therefore in round numbers 50 times a year, and you're going to lose sort of 1% each time, that's half your list you've churned already. So I think, answering the question which Skip posed to us, sort of 20 to 30% is entirely feasible, once you aggregate those small numbers.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Guy. And the other thing I think about those small numbers is, if going back to Alice's example, if you've got a 0.1% unsubscribe rate and you see in a specific campaign, or you start to see a trend where it goes up to 0.2%, and you're thinking, oh, well, it's gone from 2 to 4 or whatever. Yeah, but it's also grown up by 100%, right? So that's a clear indicator that something's probably not right, not good.
Yeah.
So Fran McCann has asked a couple of questions around. So it sounds like they've recently migrated to a new CRM and ESP. That was bold. I'm not sure I'd throw those two things at the same time. And obviously, it was a good time to clean up the data. So the first question was, do you recommend removing zero engagement contacts for database health? And I think we've covered that. But the next question was, and this one is, it was one of the ones I wanted to get to as well. Fran says they've been really hesitant to clean the database of low zero engagement contacts. So many people say email is a numbers game, and you've got, it's what? How do you put the business case together that says these people aren't engaging? Doesn't really cost you that much to send them to them. So what's the business case? How would you justify that to the finance weenies?
I'll jump in first if I may. I think often when I have this conversation with our customers, first thing I'll do is actually just point them to some very standard advice. If you go to the sort of postmaster pages for Microsoft or Verizon Media, Yahoo and AOL, Gmail, and see what they say, what do they expect of good senders? And, there's some differences between them, but there's also a lot of very consistent advice. Make sure your users have opted in to receive emails, make sure you're monitoring your sender reputation, make sure you're signed up to feedback loops, make sure that you're sending to engaged users, make sure you're suppressing bounces. They all say the same thing, and it's all sort of common sense and good advice. So you're kind of thinking, well, if that's what they want, and by implication, your deliverability is going to struggle, if not tank, if you're not observing those recommendations, surely that's the impact. Those major mailbox providers are telling us what they want to see, and if you're not delivering it, you're going to struggle.
I have to say that whenever I'm doing consulting for people that aren't reaching the inbox for some reason, and I work with various charities and organizations, nonprofits, it's nearly always because they're not cleaning their data, and that's the core of the problem. It's like what you said at the beginning, Kath. The source of the data is so important. Making sure that you have those people who want to receive mail from you are expecting to receive mail from you. That having lots of invalid or unengaged addresses on your database is a surefire way to make sure you're not getting to the inbox. And if you're not reaching the inbox at all, then your whole list suffers because of this dead wood that you can just cut out. Or even not cut it out, but email to it less, or email to it with a different tone of voice, or ask a different question of that, because what you're sending to them already isn't resonating with them.
Yeah.
So I would add to that, same as so when I'm consulting also, I have to take it on a case by case basis, right? As you said, Alice, your business is completely different to, say, an e-commerce one. So you're not going to have the same strategy. You're not going to have the same advice or anything like that. So I work with a lot of, they can be quite extreme. So some of my clients are, as the one I'm currently working with, who's quite extreme, and they're just, messaging their inactives every day like they do their actives, right? Which is not the best strategy, and it's not working for them, and they're in big trouble. But then another client I was working with last week, they literally, if they haven't opened within 90 days, they don't mail them anymore. And which is totally, again, they're missing a trick. So they're almost living in fear of what could happen, even though they've not had that deliverability problem or anything like that. So it really is a case of, don't just go with, oh, you read that's what you should do, and therefore you need to delve into your data. You need to understand your inactives. You need to understand at what point do they become inactive. Is there something in that in between, so they've just recently become inactive, and before they're, completely dormant or dead. Yeah. What can we do? Can we set up an automated, triggered campaign aimed at trying to incentivize them, to try and get them and everything, reactivate them? Because these actually work really well so that you can still be messaging less frequently, obviously, your actual inactives, but it doesn't overly impact your deliverability because it's going out on, dripping through your automated program. So these are the kind of things. I don't say it again.
Sorry, Kath. I was just going to say, I think you need to really start to get an understanding of why people have become unengaged as well. And I know she doesn't have it with her. Change.org has a really pretty, looks like some sort of weird 60s psychedelic picture thing of how they segment. But one of the things is, why did somebody become inactive? Why have they become unengaged? Because at the end of the day, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to get what you got. So if they became unengaged because your content wasn't resonating with them, you can re-engage them. And if you're an e-com business, you can throw them an offer or whatever it is you do to re-engage them. But if they're really not into you, they're just going to become disengaged again, right? So it's think about going back to what you said, Kath. Figure out when people become disengaged and try to come up with reasons why they become disengaged. What are the motivations behind that? And is that something you can fix? Because it might not be. And then it's just, okay, we've gone our separate ways. It's not you, it's me. And we'll just part company, kind of thing.
So Leah,
Leah,
what did you guys used to do at eBay? I remember, when we worked together at eBay, but you didn't actually have
about it a lot, right?
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of things on the topic. First of all is accept the fact that not everyone is going to love your content. So you can initiate some activities to understand when this is happening. So when you know that there is going to be a bit of fatigue, you can start to see two metrics and see what is the opening frequency, something happening, maybe I have to change something. And you can include as well in your program some reactivations when they start to come to that cutoff date. So maybe when they've not been engaging for 12 months, and on the 13th month, already on the 11th month, you start to send some activities that are aiming to re-engaging the users. This is on one side. On the other side, the question is, how do you make the business case? I think that part of the question was, how do you justify it to your business? And unfortunately, it's tough to explain it, because you speak with the business and you're like, oh, I have 5 million people in the database, but actually there is only 1 million that is really engaged, and because something has not been done before, and it happens. So you can do some things, of course, but the best thing is, as Alice was saying, as I was saying, like, go through the suffering of doing it, and go as well through the experience of avoiding having to do that in the future. I think is the best advice that can be given.
I think we're probably sitting here sort of assuming that most programs do sort of measure and differentiate on the basis of more active subscribers and less active. But I talked about the marketer tracker report a moment ago, and there was an aha moment for us where sort of senders were asked, do you have a measure of, that threshold when your audience moves from sort of active to inactive? And actually only about 2/3 of them said yes. The rest were either no or don't know. And then of those 2/3 that said yes, the sort of follow-up question was, and do you act on that? Where you can identify inactives, do you do something different? And only about sort of 3/4 of those said yes. So, you multiply those two numbers together, and there's a lot of programs out there. I think we're sitting here assuming that everybody does it. There's a lot that don't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Listen, this is a very good conversation, but I do want to make sure we have enough time to get into the growth part of the discussion. And we've got a couple of great questions already. And I'm going to start with David, who I'm guessing it's not David Merkel. I think it's David from Merkel. I think there's a comma in there. It's hard to see on my screen. But anyway, if a client doesn't have the luxury or time of organically growing their database, what do you recommend? What should they be doing for list growth? And maybe conversely, what shouldn't they be doing?
Yeah, so David, that's David Fowler, I think it would be. He's at Merkel. So he, you know,
David Father.
yeah,
David, next
yeah.
time, sign it with your last name, mate. Come on.
So I think, you know, so depending on the laws of the country, right? So in the US, list rental, list purchasing is still absolutely huge, but it still is, you know, regarded as a frowned upon, tactic to use. And that's not just because it can affect your deliverability, not just because it's really hard to actually find an ESP that will allow you to send that list, but also because you're not going to get the results. So whilst that still is a very, it still is incredibly popular. You wouldn't believe how many prospects a week contact me and say, we've just bought a list, we want you to send our first email program. And I say, yeah, that's not what we do, sorry. But you can be doing the same sort of concept, but it's more permission marketing. And so that means that you are actually leveraging other people's emails and newsletters and everything and getting permission to do that. But you have to be very, very explicit. You have to be offering a really, really good incentive for them to be actually even looking at you. So again, you're still not going to get great results, but they're going to be better than if you're going to be using list rental. And I also know that Dirk is in the audience at the moment because I said hello to him a minute ago. And, he's got a great tool that allows you to be doing these fantastic competitions. So competitions can work really, really well. Again, here's type of not just the normal type of competitions, because the normal type of competitions, you can often be left with that whole quality versus quantity, in that you get the quantity, but you don't necessarily get the quality, also depending upon, what prize are you offering. So if you're going to be offering, hey, we're going to give you an iPad, and then everyone, including their grandma and possibly even the grandma's kitchen sink is going to be actually doing the competition. So that's not a quality database at all. So there's a few tactics out there, but I've only named a couple. If anyone else wants to jump in.
I think my pet topic at the moment is e-receipts, and seen some research which has said that especially since GDPR was implemented, it's actually been a top 3 source of list acquisition. And I think what's nice about it is we're seeing that there's a profile associated with consumers that are willing to receive an e-receipt, which is that they are typically more likely to be a email power user and highly engaged with the email channel generally. They're more likely to sort of be, come pre-primed for loyalty as well. So I think, is it like a great way to acquire an address? Absolutely. And I think, there's some brands that do it really well. There's a lot that either don't do it well or don't do it at all, and it's a missed opportunity. I think especially when it's a source of addresses, but B, a source of highly primed addresses who are going to be good for your program because they're sort of bringing a natural propensity to engage with them as they enter your program.
Well, and actually, guy, there's a third benefit to that, is it's a great way to tie your online and offline sales together. So you get a much more complete picture of the customer.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, I love e-receipts. Any others? Alice, there's actually a question specifically aimed at you. Were there any levers that you pulled to drive the exponential growth of the list? Or is it just based on the current events and what you guys do?
It took a global pandemic and a huge outcry against the murder of George Floyd and other racial justice instances. So that sort of hit us, and lots of people came to the site because they really wanted to take action. So we didn't drive it other than by being there. But it's a really interesting challenge for us now to see how can we serve those users that have come, especially if you come to a change.org petition, we call it a breakout petition. Lots of people, it's in the media, lots of people know about it. Often you only come to sign that petition. You're not interested in signing more. And so it's for us to listen to our users to understand if they still want to hear from us. And when they get fatigue of hearing about a certain subject, possibly they don't want to hear about COVID anymore. Everyone is over it. You know, we wish we were, but we're so not. But you don't want to hear about it in your inbox necessarily. So we've got to be really sensitive to that and listen to our users and what they want from us and make sure that that's what we're giving them.
I heard a great point.
Sorry, Skip, I was going to say, I heard another sort of really interesting take on this recently from one of our big e-commerce customers, you know, sort of think of a sort of European version of Habitat. And they saw exactly that. They saw massive list growth. But obviously the list growth was coming from customers who are far more traditional offline customers. And he was saying they actually had to think quite carefully about almost treating these new customers as a separate profile, because, you know, they're not natural online inhabitants. You know, it's a slightly new environment for them, and thinking about serving them with slightly different messaging, serving them with a slightly different user experience, you know, sort of creating virtual tours of their stores, you know, because they would be more likely to do a sort of walk around a real store. And he was saying they were very, very intentional about thinking, you know, the profile of this glut of new subscribers, you know, they've been almost forced online to, you know, continue engaging with us, but we need to treat them slightly different. Otherwise, they are going to churn en masse when normality resumes.
Yeah, this is, it's actually something I've seen as well in one of my previous companies where we were keeping the data when we had activities, for example, like a member get member campaign, where we were like initiating some activities so that friends would recommend join on this content so we can do something together. We were really flagging that because we wanted to see the churn over time. And it was very interesting to be able to see the numbers and compare it compared to the regular. We were seeing that there was a difference. It was still growth and it was still like a relationship that you could nurture, but it was coming from a different promise, I would say.
And this is a really key factor, and I found that during my consulting with, you know, numerous clients, not everyone actually records the source. And this is absolutely key. We're talking about growing a healthy database, and this actually affects the growing and the healthy, is understanding which sources actually work best for you, not just a return on investment, but also with complaints and everything like that too. So really, you know, go in, drill in, analyze it, pull it apart and sort of go, okay, is this source working for us? Just because it works for everyone else doesn't mean that it's going to work for you, and actually doesn't work for everyone else, or if they just not done the analysis. So,
well, yeah. Exactly, and understand the cost of getting the data into the database, and the quality of the data coming in. One of the questions I was going to ask before, it's a good time to ask it now. Is we talked a lot about cleaning up your database, but what can you do to prevent it from being rubbish in the first place? How can you keep it healthy at source?
Well, I mean, Alice referred to it at the very beginning when she first said, you know, sort of doing real-time validation is always going to help, and not necessarily just the you know, making sure that there's no typos, or that there's, you know, so it's not gmail.com, not .com and things like that. You can actually go beyond that now, and you can be, you know, it can be running it up and just checking that it is a valid address. But I think, Guy, you can probably speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, we can. So, you know, I'm not going to sort of sit here doing a sales pitch, but it is part of what Validity does. The idea that you can do sort of, you know, real-time lookups of email addresses. And I think, you know, it's just another good and common sense tool in an email marketer's arsenal. You know, you don't want to be bringing a bad address into your list. And, you know, there's a few reasons for that. I think, you know, it's wasted time and effort. You know, every email address that you acquire has a cost per acquisition. it can be a bigger number than most people think. We asked that as part of DMA research, and the answer was in the order of £30 an address. So, every time you're taking a bad address into your program, it's not just inconvenient because it's going to generate a bounce and it's going to create deliverability issues and reputation issues. There's a real cost associated with it as well. So, sort of head that off at the pass.
Well, and even just obviously you can validate and verify email, but you can validate other fields as well, right? So don't get the good email address, but have the name be Mickey Mouse, because then when we do our personalization conversation, the first question we'll get is, well, all my first names are wrong, so I can't personalize. Well, you should have made sure they were right on the way in.
I read an article today that it was with, who was it with? Oh my goodness. A big brand in the US ended up sending to people that had been wrongly signed up. So obviously they didn't use double opt-in, but someone had signed them up and they were using racist slurs as their first names. It was absolutely atrocious.
Who was that? That was Walmart.
Walmart. It was Walmart. I was going to say Walmart. Okay. Yeah.
And I think, that's so important, but also to continue to make sure that you're validating your addresses as you go. You think that you've only got one chance to do that at the point of sign up, but actually a lot of people, if they don't 100% trust your brand, might not be using their primary address to sign up for your program. They might be using an address that they don't use that often, or they don't care if it receives spam. But maybe when they come back to your site, especially if they're coming back to change.org, we'd like to think they get more deeply involved in a campaign. Once we've built that trust, we want to ask them, have we still got your details correct? Are you still using this email address? Do we have your name spelled correctly? And, and allowing people to do that, make sure that your data continues to be clean and up to date.
Yeah, and I would say that probably, sorry.
I was just going to say quickly, Alice, I have one of those accounts, and clearly there are a lot of brands that don't look at inactivity, because I have 92,900 unread emails in that account.
I so feel you. I think that there is another thing, like when you use the email address as the element to log in and is your key field, then it becomes a problem, because you can't go back and modify it. So when you're changing habits, you can't fix it. So that one would be another thing that I would say, like, make sure that you have two ways, or that you create the mechanism so that people can modify it and update it as they change habits.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And especially different markets have different, you'll find that there's a one-to-one relationship between email and the individual in certain markets, and in other markets, there's a one to very many relationship. And so you need to understand those differences in those markets.
Yeah, and not only that, with B2C, okay, so, occasionally someone will change from, say Hotmail to Gmail or Outlook to Gmail or whatever the story is. But it happens more often, and as we know with COVID and everything, B2B, people are changing all the time, and they're changing their addresses and everything. So it really, really is important for you to actually give them the ability to do that. Otherwise, you're forcing them essentially to unsubscribe, but will they actually resubscribe? Whereas if you
resubscribe, Kath, it's so funny you mentioned that. The project I was working on just before I dialed in for this is a thing for the DMA where we're putting together some advice. Because so many businesses captured the home address of people during the pandemic, either to fulfill some swag, or in a lot of cases, the IT department outsources that function, and so all the tech gets sent from somebody, and now they've got all the employees' home addresses in their database as well. And what are the implications of that if we go back to the office? So that's a really interesting one, is flagging the data as to where you got it and why you got it, and understanding how you're going to use it and for how long.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got 5 more minutes until we move over to the roundtables. This is probably a really quick answer, but Marilyn Gill asks, she's working with a client that's migrating ESP, and she's taken all of the unsub data and unengaged data, and she's exported that. Should she load it into the new ESP as a suppression file, or just store it in a secure database somewhere, or delete it.
We could probably answer this one in unison.
1, 2, 3.
No, it's too.
Oh, you guys missed your cue. Anybody want to pick that one up quickly?
Come on, you should definitely import the unsubscribe list, and you should keep them as unsubscribed, because if you delete them, then you've got no idea that they've unsubscribed, and they may rejoin and you may resend to them. So I would say definitely import that unsubscribed file, and make sure they're marked as unsubscribed, because that is one of the most common mistakes, is that you re-import it and you send to it via a new email service provider. So make sure that they're definitely marked as being unsubscribed. Any unsubscribed, and certainly any emails that have been suppressed due to complaints, you really need to make sure you still got a record of those.
In fact, you sort of have a moral obligation to keep track of that and to make sure that you don't accidentally send to those people again. Now I want to follow that question up with an interesting one, going back to the growth point. Okay, so should all of the data that we capture go into the database? And this is probably more of like a B2B question, but I could see some B2C examples of this. And basically, you're giving away something, right? You're giving away a white paper or a download or access to a webinar or something. But as a brand, you know you're never going to sell to this person. What should you do with them?
So, okay. So what is it that you do? So my consultant hat on, going, okay, why are you collecting that much data in the first place? What is your aim with it? If you're only going to
I'll give you
2%, why aren't you therefore identifying them and then putting them on a sequence and collecting that and making it easier for those that you're not interested in, just to.
I'll give you a great example, Catherine. I'm not saying the guy Validity does or doesn't do this, but guy's sitting here, so I'm gonna use Validity as an example. Validity solutions are very well priced for the value they deliver to the brands they deliver it to, but the email marketing manager is not going to be the person that purchases those decisions or those solutions. So I'm an email marketing manager, and I go to the Validity website, and I want to download this latest report on email deliverability. But Validity is never going to be able to sell to me.
No, but you're going to be an influencer. You're definitely going to be an influencer. So you still do have a role, even though it's not necessarily a direct role. And this is, from the sales perspective, they're still going to be using that information to actually be getting a greater picture of the that company as to whether they're appropriate or suitable for their products. So yeah, there's I'd be looking at this definitely on a one by one basis and really questioning why they're wanting to collect the data in the first place. Can they use progressive form fills, things like that? Are they necessary? There's a lot of stuff there. So, but I mean, we haven't even started talking about the progressive forms. We haven't even talked about positioning on the website in order to get greater amount of eyes on your forms so they can subscribe. And one of the things that's really true to, or really dear to my heart, is one of the issues that I come across time and time again when, a client said to me, "Can you help us?" And I say, "Sure, okay." And then we end up finding out that what I just said then, those progressive form fills, the placement on the website and everything, they don't have any say on that whatsoever as email marketers, even though their remit is to grow their list. But they're trying to do it with their hands tied behind their back, and that is a real challenge.
And it actually, this is very interesting, because this is as well what is happening when you, as email marketer, you're saying, I think that we should have more constraints when we are registering the data so that they can be more compliant, correct, and complete. Taking one, of course, from
nice.
And you can't really it's the 3 C's. And you can't really, you have like a business need on one side to grow the numbers, and on the other side you want to bring in quality. So as Alice was saying, you want to bring in good data in so that you can have a good output. Finding that balance and as well accept the fact that there's a bit of a lag, so sometimes it changes in one direction or another. I think it is incredibly important that whatever you do, you keep track of what has happened and what has changed when, because otherwise it becomes very difficult to track it back, and your list is not going to be healthy at the end of this.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And I think we could actually, to Cass' point, we didn't get to touch on a whole bunch of stuff around the mechanics. So maybe a follow-up conversation either for the roundtables or for another day. But unfortunately, it is now. It's all we have time for today. It's time to move on to the roundtable section. So the way this works, folks, is you just you find a virtual seat. Looks like a table. There are only 4 seats, but actually I think it takes up to 8 or 10. Pick the table that you want to sit at, and we'll keep the conversation going. You can ask anything you want. You can move tables anytime you want. Nobody's going to be offended. It's all fun. So let's just quickly wrap up here. So please let us know what you thought by putting some comments in the chat. And please join me in giving a big thanks to our sponsors, our gold sponsors, Iterable and Validity. Thanks, Guy. Appreciate that. And our silver sponsors, Email Expert and RPE Origin. And, of course, a tremendous thank you to all of our panelists, Alice, Leah, Guy, and Kath. And most of all, I want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon, asking such great questions. Really, really good chat today. Kath and I'll be back on the 8th of June with Scott Cohen, Ada Bartlett, and Ryan Phelan talking about understanding and managing your ever-changing data. So maybe we can get into some of these progressive profiling forms and stuff like that then. In the meantime, join us at the roundtables. Now, like I said, pop in, grab a seat. This is your opportunity to continue the conversation with our panelists and meet other marketers who are facing similar challenges. Don't worry. Please turn on your sound. Please turn on your video. Don't worry if you're wearing that comfortable but somewhat, pandemic-worn hoodie. We won't judge. It's a safe space. We're not going to record anything, so nobody's really going to know. And remember that somebody, one lucky person, will win a copy of Cass' book. Don't forget to look for the expert there on the front page. Expert there on the front page. If you can't join us, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, be safe and make good choices.